All right, welcome to Two Sons Podcast. Happy Thursday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week so far. Jam-packed episode 5
So much.
of Rings of Power today.
We're on the ball.
We had our first kind of like Game of Thrones-y moment when our guy Valandil gets stabbed in the back by Kemen.
Gosh,
That
he
was
is the
a
most
crazy scene.
I heard Nerd of the Rings podcast talk about how Kemen is the most punchable character, and I could not agree with that more.
Oh, dude, when he ever since the first time that he was talking shit about the queen before the coup,
Yeah.
and Valandil actually like threatened him. It was kind of cool because like I kept saying to Carly I'm dying to just watch Valandil just beat the living shit out of this guy, and so
Right.
we kind of get that, like it starts happening, and then there's this weird like reversal of fortune where he almost gets drowned.
I know.
But then
I was like, are they going to
yeah.
show someone get drowned in this show? They almost
Yeah.
did.
I'm glad they didn't though, because that wouldn't have made any sense to me. There's just no version of that where like Valandil, like literally the one guy who landed his blade on Galadriel in season 1, when everyone was trying to, for him to get like literally just reversaled,
Yeah.
and just drowned
by some scrawny
little prick. I was not feeling that, but like
No.
honestly, like it was really good drama because I thought that the Queen Muriel, former Queen Muriel, when she had to
She's
talk
my queen.
with she's my queen. She's my queen. The greens and the reds are going at each other again. The when she was having that conversation with Elendil early on, and she's talking about restraint, I literally, as they were first having that conversation, I looked over at Carly and I was like, this is like Game of Thrones. Like they just need to leave. Like they need to get out of the city. Like there's no version of this where they're not going to be. And then like it started to kind of head down that path. It's like, okay, every member of the Sea Guard that was loyal to the Queen had to like give up their. So like that was crazy. And then obviously that whole we're just going to shut down the shrine. It's like they're clearly being antagonistic. Like they're clearly being like there's some tiny shred of honor that's stopping them from straight Game of Thrones murdering everybody.
Yeah.
But it's clear that that's what they want to do. And so I do think that's where this is going to end up. I think Elendil and Muriel are going to literally leave Numenor and flee to Westeros. Flee to Middle Earth. Sorry, it's getting a little crossed up in my head here. There's a lot of lore.
Hey, that's such a compliment, though, for us to get those mixed up. I mean, Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings, I mean, they're pretty similar in some ways.
Do you think that they're going to leave Numenor? There's no way they stick around.
No, and like, what is she going to do? Stay in her tower and be like, oh, well, thanks for letting me keep my tower, everybody. Yeah, there's no way.
Did you think that, I thought that the scene where she basically like asked Elendil, like, what did you see? And then he said, I was lost. I was walking outside of the palace, blah, 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 which I think we can kind of not necessarily assume, but I think he might somehow manage to escape prison because he got imprisoned at the end of that scene.
Right.
I think he might somehow escape prison and then flee the city and end up kind of in the woods. I'm guessing where that ends up. But what I thought was really fascinating is Muriel's kind of point of view, which was, like every single time I touched it, I saw Numenor being swallowed by the sea. So like clearly like something changed with Pharazôn taking leadership, and like to her credit, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of Rhaenyra's initial kind of like conflict in her head at the beginning of the Dance of Dragons, where it's basically like, yeah, don't get me wrong, like I'm the rightful ruler,
right?
But like if it's actually best for the realm if I don't have control, like she was like, I'll cede control to Alicent as long as I don't have to burn half the country to the ground.
Yeah, exactly.
And I feel like that's Muriel's point of view, is like, if this is what it takes, like if I have to lose leadership in order for Numenor to survive, like I'm happy to do it.
Well, and it's in such great contrast with literally everybody else who's in power. She's the only one that was truly in power. She's no longer in power, but she's the only one that's truly showed restraint, even to some capacity. Like Galadriel is even having an issue showing restraint now that she has her ring. Like literally, first of all the rings, now that King Durin has his ring, like, talk about restraint. Like, holy crap. It's giant shit show with him now. But it was super refreshing to see Muriel show restraint and then put her own ego aside, which is so rare, especially for someone of power. Put her ego aside in order for like the betterment of the masses.
She's an incredible ruler. Like she had a strong stance at the beginning of season 1, which fell in line with the majority of the populace, which was like, screw the elves. They have forgotten about us. They don't, they don't give a shit about us. Like we're kind of on our own.
Right.
And then she, and when Galadriel shows up and asks her to sail to Middle Earth to help save the men in the Southlands, she originally says no, but then she gets this sign, right? The leaves falling off the tree. She's seen the image of Numenor getting swallowed by the sea. So she like kind of changed. She's not too stubborn to pay attention to the omens that are around her, right? And then like one of the things that I think is most commonly looked over with all world leaders is like they have the burden of knowledge.
Yeah.
And like
I think about that a lot, actually. Almost as much as I think about Rome.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's like at least once a day. But like that's the thing. Like I think with all foreign policy, like obviously, like I don't know enough about it to have any sort of strong opinion. But at the same time, like I do. One of the reasons why I don't go off flapping my gums criticizing world leaders all nonstop is like we don't actually know. We're not in the briefing rooms. We don't understand the actual pieces of information that are coming out. Like, remember when Trump was president and he used to come out and be like, you guys wouldn't believe the shit that I see in these. It's
like, dude, we believe you. Like the world, it feels like the world almost ended like twice last week, and that's every week.
Dude, and then like literally like there was, I think I was listening to Dave Chappelle one time and he was making fun of Trump. He's like, you're not supposed to say that part. Like you're supposed to keep that shit a secret. But like the truth is like there's the burden of knowledge piece. And I think this is like a really interesting example of it in the in Numenor, where it's like literally Muriel has this perspective. She has repeatedly seen like a glimpse of the future in which all of their society gets swallowed by the sea, literally. So like none of the people know that.
Yeah, and she can be like, I saw in my seeing stone, everyone got killed.
Yeah, exactly.
That does not go over well.
Exactly. So she's in this kind of awkward position where she doesn't really have a choice but to do whatever it is that she deems right to deal with this potential outcome.
Right.
Meanwhile, like she's getting shredded for it. And I thought it was fascinating even at when Aerion when she led the coup. Like remember when she was like, guys, like we need the stone. Like we're gonna need it because and she didn't even in that situation she didn't actually like put credence to the reason why, but she was hinting at it.
Right. And then that was one of the tools that they used in order to get Queen Muriel out, right? And then the episode ends with the Pharazôn like opening up the stone and about to look into it. Mm-hmm. That pissed me off. He is the worst. Like that father-son duo is so dislikable.
Oh my gosh.
So dislikable.
Yeah, and I wonder what he would even have seen without things have changed. And I don't understand how even Elendil not seeing the town get swallowed is even any sort of sign that that's not going to happen. I think even
true, it could just be like even beforehand. Yeah,
but like I tend to think that there's a little bit of an element of Sauron's doing there because like we talked about this in the when we did the first 3 episodes, but it's kind of a fascinating concept of like we talked about it like comparing it to Plagueis, like Darth Plagueis and Darth Sidious like deliberately fostered inequality in the Outer Rim,
right,
and made it so that they were being taken advantage of by all these cartels, and then he deliberately fostered like corruption, but also like all the rich people were doing great in the core, and so like he made it so that it was all it took was a small spark for war to start. You know what I mean? Like, and that's kind of the idea is like it's like all you had to do was make the dwarves desperate, they came crawling for the rings. All you had to do is make the elves desperate, they came crawling for the rings. And like I tend to think that like there was probably the Palantir was connected to Sauron in the Lord of the Rings movies.
The originals, yeah.
Every time someone touched the Palantir, they would actually see the eye of Sauron. So he clearly has some in
with those.
To the Palantir, and it's very possible that he was using that to poison Muriel's mind.
That's true. Part of me, and one of our viewers, I'm sure, or many of our viewers will know, I don't know if he's quite poisoned that just quite yet. It feels like that's still pure.
I don't know.
Down the road, we know.
It's just a theory.
We know that it does. But right now, it feels pure. What are your thoughts on the lack of showing for the Stranger's arc in this episode. Like, how do you feel about it? Do you feel like you missed out, or do you feel like the show is more watchable? Because for me, even though I find that storyline very compelling, when it's actually showing, it bores me so much. So this episode felt like super intense. It felt super high stakes, and it dawned on me that the Stranger arc line wasn't shown this week, and I'm wondering if that's why I felt like that. Like, at the end of the day, it's going to be cool to see all of these storylines collide, and I'm happy that they're developing that. It's super, super important. But the show was a little bit more digestible this week for me without that.
Yeah,
despite me liking his character.
I agree with you that it's the most boring storyline. I think it will become a good storyline in the long run.
Agreed.
And there's certainly some they're certainly taking some time to really delve into like the backstory, not just of the Harfoots, but it's clearly that element of the story is an origin story for I think it's Gandalf a lot. Some people in the comments think it's one of the Blue Wizards, but like I think it's Gandalf and an origin story for the Hobbits, and and I get that, but like eventually there needs to be a more direct kind of involvement in things. You know what's interesting though is like we ended with a cliffhanger last week, which was Galadriel getting captured.
Yes.
And then they barely brought her into this episode
That's
at the very end. And one of the things that I, thought when I saw that was like, this is kind of what's cool about the massive world building of these types of universes is like, you could, and they do this in Game of Thrones too, where it's like, in this episode, we're focusing on these 2 or 3 storylines. And then like maybe in the next episode, we're focusing on 2 or 3 completely different storylines. But eventually you get invested in all of them.
Right.
And like, that's the beautiful thing that happens with Game of Thrones, which I've been trying to get you to watch the show for, is like, you get to a point, like once you're in like season 3 where you're so deeply invested that like, as it hops from story to story, you're like, oh shit, it's like we're in this.
It's like 5 separate like medias.
But they're all great. And and that's kind of the thing. And I think all of the storylines aside from the Stranger storyline are great at this point. And I do think the Stranger storyline will come around.
I totally agree with you. This is part of the process. And you and I have talked about this time and time again. In order for a world to be truly built out, there's got to be some boring parts. And that's totally okay. Because at the end of the day, after we've invested ourselves in Poppy and Nori and the Stranger, like it's going to feel that much more powerful when Fit does hit the Shan. Right?
Exactly. That I enjoyed season 1 of Rings of Power, but not that much. I would say that season 2 of Rings of Power for me has been more enjoyable than any of the House of the Dragon content so far. And I think House of the Dragon will come around. I think it'll have its moments, but like it's just I'm really invested in all the characters at this point. The action is really good. I'm very, very invested in the villain. I just find Sauron to be really interesting.
Well, there's 2 great villains. Actually, there's multiple great villains if you really think about it. Adar is a super interesting villain as well. And almost likable in some weird way.
Yeah.
And it's hard to explain. And then now King Durin is even turning into a villain very quickly. Yeah. Right? Like, do you think there's any chance that Galadriel joins forces with the orcs?
So I don't know what direction that's going, because I do know that Sauron does eventually have the orcs back under his thumb.
Right.
Because in the final battle on the slopes of Mount Doom, he has the orcs fighting with him.
Yes.
But like it's tricky because we all know that like I watched that Man of Recaps video on season 1, and he was like making that joke. He's like, Adar was like, I'm actually one of the former elves, blah blah blah, and then it's like actually Galadriel was like, actually I just want to genocide you. Like she so profoundly hates them that like it's impossible to imagine some sort of like bridge between those two parties. That's what I feel like too. But like I have a feeling that because Galadriel is very much like sell her soul to beat Sauron, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of working together there. If not like actually arm in arm, like fighting alongside each other, at least tactically,
skipping down the way with each other.
At least tactically, I think it'll be a thing. I like the part you're talking about with the multiple villains though, because that to me is one of my favorite things in these shows is when you have somebody that you're like really rooting against, and like in Game of Thrones, it's like Joffrey, that kind of thing, or Cersei, that kind of stuff. Like one of the things in this show is like, it's like the Kemen character. Like you're just like, this dude needs to die in a brutally painful way. Like and then you find yourself actively rooting, and then that's how it goes. It's like, oh shit, yeah, he's kicking his ass, and then he actually stabbed him in the back, and he's back on top, and he arrested everybody, and like he may have a dislocated shoulder or whatever. But
that was gnarly. I was surprised with that. They there has been a considerable amount of violence in this season.
Yeah.
I think in comparison to last, like when Sauron's getting stabbed like 16 times.
That was pretty gruesome.
That was pretty gruesome. Yeah.
It was okay though. He just turned into a pile of earthworms.
Yeah, he just turned into venom. And
Did you see that video that I sent you on Instagram of that
yes.
dude? There's this dude, you guys have probably seen him if you're ever on Instagram, but he just takes like AI to like superimpose faces of these characters.
Traditionally Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan.
Yeah, and like he does great Star Wars ones. He's done great Game of Thrones ones. He's done great Lord of the Rings ones. But he had one where he had Gandalf like, oh yes, this is just like in the book, and then he like had Gandalf like reading as if it was Tolkien's words, like the story of the earthworms. And then he roadkilled his way onto the wagon.
Yeah, that was also the same day that you sent me the video where everyone learns that the orcs have families.
Oh yeah, that was absurd.
And then they start to just get really, really guilty about killing all these orcs. Right, that was hilarious.
We didn't talk about that last week, but that is like a huge. From what I understand, like I haven't done the research, and seriously, if there's a Tokenite that's listening, if you guys can give us a little bit of a backstory on the orcs. But all I remember is in Isengard, Sauron using orcs to like breed Uruk-hai, and he was doing it by like stirring these mud pots, and they were like born as adults out of these like mud pot things that he was like making. So like I don't know, but there's an easy explanation there too though, because Uruk-hai are like an elevated form of orc. They're bigger, they're stronger, they're faster, they're like that kind of thing. So like it's very possible that maybe a little baby orc grew to be a man orc, and then Sauron threw him in the pot and like did some magic on it.
I think that's what it was. I think from what I understand, and I'm so not a Lord of the Rings buff, but
stick your neck out.
From what I understand, is Tolkien does talk about orcs propagating in the same way that humans do.
Oh, really? Interesting.
I don't know the exact quote, but I saw something on social media, so you know it's real. But apparently he mentioned something along the lines of that orcs propagate the same way humans do.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So it seems legit. Now, are they super lovey-dovey where like dad's going over to mama orc and baby orc and like snuggling them after talking about like killing someone? I don't know. I know that did piss off some like true Lord of the Rings fans.
Yeah,
I know that really pissed some people off.
Yeah, if you're a true like deep diehard Lord of the Rings fan, give us your take in the comments on the baby orcs. Let's talk about the dwars for a little bit.
That is my favorite storyline so far.
Yeah, it's super profoundly
it is
interesting.
Awesome.
It was a little cheesy at the start when during the king is when he's like barely swinging the axe and it's making these pretty deep
huge hunks of just,
and then also when he's like, this is a foundation wall, we can't hit that, and then he gets like 6 inches into it and it's just sunlight, and I'm like, okay, like I wish we could have like time lapsed a tunnel there or something.
Yes, or at least had some people helping out the king, the old king,
for sure.
You know, that was a little bit cheesy.
But the rings helping them read the mountain to me was something that I like was a believable kind of like plot device. I agree. I did get that. Yeah,
I agree. The other thing that was a little bit cheesy, and again, this is superficial. Like Jason and I are not really talking trash about, you know, Lord of the Rings, but I thought it was funny how I think she called it a singing stone or something along that line, where Disa like lost control of the stone that she had just purchased, and it's like rolling down the little walkway, and then it goes like a total of 50 yards total, and then she goes into this giant cavern that she acted like no one had known about. And then she starts to sing in it, and then all of a sudden, you know, she hears this like billowing creature in the background, which presumably we know what that is.
I didn't interpret that as like the creature was right there. Like the way I looked at it is it was just a random offshoot with a little water patch.
And
like
the acoustics.
For all we know, it's just like an area in the cave that no one
like a little
uses.
Park.
Yeah, but like she sings to the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I viewed it almost as like the sound like travels through the mountain.
That's totally reasonable.
And then the thing sung back at her, but that was cool. And like we now have Durin and Elrond both are like thoroughly like Sauron's up to some shit.
Yeah,
this is about to go down. We got to get this together, which is funny because they're the two friends.
Mm-hmm.
But like those two, they have no hope of stopping this whole situation. No. Durin is completely
the rings are out
poisoned.
And about.
They're pulling a lot of similar devices from the Lord of the Rings.
You notice how he just gets a little bit more decked out in gold every single time you see him. You see him in his office, and there's just this cauldron of gold items next to him.
Dude,
he's just turning into a giant
king.
King Durin, of course.
That is the thing that that happens beyond the rings too. If you guys remember the Hobbit movies, and I'm not sure how much this is tied to actual Tolkien lore, but in the Hobbit movies, when the dwarves do finally get into the mountain where the dragon was, they the head dwarf, I can't remember his name, but he ends up succumbing to like gold poisoning,
gold fever or something like that.
Yeah, gold fever, and that's where he just gets like fucking crazy.
And then the dragons get attracted to it.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It never ends well. Well, there was a really powerful quote, and I'm going to butcher it, but it was something along the lines of when Prince Durin was talking to King Durin says something like, we've taken but a thimbleful of the ocean of wealth in which this mountain can provide for us. And for a dwarf to say that about his home and his mountain, like you can tell he's already getting like super jacked up by that ring.
And then his delve master caught him like having like a weird moment, like, did you take my ring? And it's
right.
Like,
and he's like,
oh,
no.
like, you took it off and you said your hand. He said his hand was heavy, which is exactly what Frodo used to say about the ring around his neck. The chain would like leave an indentation on his neck. There's a lot of, we had the rings for men that they tried making. They made one of them, and that one chick put it on and she went invisible, and she started seeing the Shadow Realm, which is exactly what happened to Frodo. So like there's a lot of corollaries in the way that these rings act to the actual Ring of Power, the main, the primary Ring of Power, which is, I'm very fascinated by it. My thing is like, it's so abundantly clear that like everyone is so racked with desperation that they're not seeing 10 inches in front of their face. Right. And some of this is like completely ridiculous. Like some of the stuff with Celebrimbor, like I'm like
it's hard to watch. Yeah, I you know it has to happen. But
yeah, but it's like dudes, you guys got to see through this a little bit. The only thing that's making me kind of buy into the Anatar concept a little bit is like you saw when Elendil surrendered his Seaguard sword. Mm-hmm. When all of the Seaguard members like were wishing him well, and they kept saying like Valar be with you, Valar bless you, all this kind of
They're
stuff.
Still
like
pledging
the Valar
allegiance to
him.
them
are their gods, and so Anatar is essentially half god because he's like directly from the Valar. So like that's the one thing that kind of like tricks all of us out is like once you've accepted that your rules of reality no longer apply, meaning like, okay, now this supernatural thing is occurring.
Right.
I feel like you would just be so much more malleable at that point.
Of course.
And I think that that's kind of the idea that I'm getting behind is like Anatar just has these people so wrapped around his finger. And Celebrimbor was stressing out, and he was able to weaponize that with that one girl. But it's getting nasty. It's getting nasty in Eregion.
And he's always one step ahead. That's the biggest theme of this show so far, right? Is Sauron is always one step ahead. And he was even one step ahead with that one chick, because when she puts the ring on and when she starts to see the Shadow Realm, she's seeing Sauron. Right?
Yeah,
like that's she's seeing. She's not seeing Celebrimbor.
Yeah, I forgot about that part.
So, and he knows that. Sauron knows that. So he goes to her before she can talk to anybody, before she can, whip up any ideas in her brain about what's going on. And he says, "Oh, that's Celebrimbor you're seeing, by the way," which was so savvy.
Well, she should have seen through that too, because like, okay, so presumably she saw Sauron. Like she saw, like I can't
she talked about like I can't remember.
She
it was
said
like something
evil.
about
she used the phrase evil.
And then eyes. She saw eyes.
Yeah.
She talked about seeing like evil eyes that were like depthless and soulless or something like that, and eternal or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. But I think she used the phrase evil at one point in time. And
it wasn't holy. Like, I'll tell you that for sure. No,
but for her to like, it's one thing for Celebrimbor to be a little twisted and to be a little bit, kind of like blind at what the path that he's on. But like for her to actually hook, line, and sinker by that Celebrimbor is evil and has eternal depth of darkness eyes. Like it's a little bit of a bridge.
That's a
too
stretch.
Far.
Yeah,
but
that's
then
a
he's
huge
like,
stretch.
"But you're as pretty as Galadriel."
I know.
And then she's like,
I know.
"Oh, really?
Oh, thanks." She's like, "You're really creepy, but I trust you." He's getting more and more weird as episodes go on. The Anatar, right?
He is, but I'm still very invested in that character. I find it to be fascinating.
Oh, it's great. It's top notch.
I'm really excited to see the forging of the Ring of Power in Mount Doom. That's going to be a cool one.
Do you think we're going to see that this season?
I bet that is the end of this season. I bet you this season ends like the finale is Sauron putting on the Ring of Power, and then like season 3 will begin with him starting to dominate the hearts and minds of the people.
They're projected for like 6 seasons of this, right? Or something like that.
I don't know.
Like,
have you done any research?
I want to say like
I would assume at least 4.
I think they're projected pretty far out.
Mm-hmm.
Don't quote me on that. Do not quote me on that. But for some reason in the back of my mind, I feel like they're projected for some multiple seasons.
I'm hoping it ends with the battle on the slopes of Mount Doom. I think
that'd be such a cool way.
I think that would be the coolest.
You know how I think it was before Obi-Wan, they had just this great synopsis of what is Star Wars. That would be really cool to have something like that as they lead into that battle, and then you see a different perspective on that battle, just like we got to see different perspectives on Order 66.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, where like the original battle is still intact, that's still canon, right? But then you see all these different angles that just paint a bigger
different
picture.
Angles
That'd be so
and
cool.
Lead ups too. So like theoretically,
exactly.
So for instance, like they actually refer to it in the. They refer to it in the kind of intro scene that Galadriel narrates, but I think she refers to it as the last alliance between elves and men. So like seeing the actual beginning of the alliance, presumably it wouldn't just start with a battle on the slopes of Mount Doom. There would be other battles. There would be a campaign that would take place.
Oh yeah.
So like actually getting all of that sorted out, I think would be really cool.
That would be dope.
But yeah, I'm excited for it all. Is there? Let's see. What else do we need to hit in this episode?
I think that's about it.
Yeah. Durin takes the prince thing, which I thought was interesting, but I thought it was cool that Disa straight up put him on the spot and was like,
that was
swear
cool.
to me that you will never wear that ring. And he did. He swore.
We'll see what happens.
He sees it. Yeah.
He sees it more than anybody.
I don't think Durin the Older is going to die during the season. It's possible that he does, but I'm not sure.
The other thing that was interesting that's just notable is Durin, before he gives the rings to the other head dwarves,
they're actually
gonna
messenger
make them,
dwarves, remember?
Yeah. But he's going to make them give part of their mines.
Dude, and he's
him.
doing that to his own citizens. Remember, like he was like, yeah, for every coin spent, a coin goes to the king. What did he call it again? He called it
the king tax or something.
The
ring tax.
I think it was called the ring tax.
Yeah. Dude, stop being a weirdo.
Yeah, man, he is definitely off the deep end at this point.
Right. Yeah, but that's all my stuff. The orcs
Sauron. Yeah. So when Prince Durin shows up and tells Celebrimbor, like, dude, the rings are like causing problems. Remember, Sauron blames Celebrimbor for lying and bringing deceit into the process.
I know.
I'm like, oh my gosh, man.
But that was so wise, and that's actually what made the whole entire Celebrimbor debacle somewhat believable, is because that is, I think, the biggest thing that fueled Celebrimbor into believing that he could still make better rings. Because at that point he was down. He thought that the rings were actually bad news potentially. He did not want to give the humans any rings. But then he's like, no, like Sauron first says, you know, if we give them to the most righteous of humans, then it'll be okay.
Yeah.
And Celebrimbor's like, no. And then he realizes that he messed up the rings, which we know is because Sauron essentially hexed them as he dropped them into the boiling cauldron of metal, right? And then Sauron essentially makes Celebrimbor believe that if they just try a little harder with these next batch of rings, that it'll be okay.
Yeah, it's got to be perfect. We got to work around the clock. It's definitely it's definitely like I had a hard time coming around on Celebrimbor turning. All he saw was the one girl elf put the ring on and be indivisible and float around as a hammer and like untie the that's really all she saw. And then all of a sudden he's like, all right, that's it, I'm back in. You guys clearly can't do this, so I've got to do it myself, and we're gonna get this thing done.
He's so into himself.
Oh gosh,
so into himself. And he's a true master at his craft, you know, like I totally get it. Like he's at the peak of what he can do, and he's truly doing great things. I mean, these rings are truly powerful, but he's just turning himself into a big idiot.
What do you think Gil-galad's going to do?
He's so stoic, and he's such a hard read.
Yeah, I had a really hard time because he's like, okay, so we can't defeat the orcs and Sauron.
Right.
But then, like, Elrond's like, we got to send off and go get this done. But then we didn't get any real closure there. So I'm curious to see where that ends up
I'm
too.
super curious as well. He's such a hard read. His character is also immensely interesting.
I agree.
You know, he's very presidential in what I remember growing up as a president should be.
Back in the good days.
Yeah, back in the good days.
Do you have any other thoughts for this particular particular episode?
No, I don't.
All right, guys, that is all we have for today. As always, we sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting the show. We will be back in about a week. Actually, Luke and I are going to record a quick little tribute to James Earl Jones. Darth Vader passed away the other day.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have that out in a couple of days, and then a week from now we'll have episode 6 of Rings of Power. We will see you then.
Thanks a lot.